This is going to take place at Posen in what used to be Poland, but is now part of Germany. There's a big conference that takes place there in October of 43. Now, despite the setbacks in Russia, despite the setbacks in Italy, it is still not a foregone conclusion that the Allies will win and the Germans will lose. That is not written in the stars. This still could go very, very wrong, right? Germany controlled Europe from Norway to the Alps, from the Atlantic to well into Russia. Germany holds a lot of territory. It still has a lot of military power. Okay? So this war, it's not, like I say, written in the stars that this war is going to be won by the Allies. But despite that, the Nazis understand this turning point has been reached. This turning point has been reached. And the goals that they had started out with probably were not attainable. So now they're probably going to have to increasingly shift over more to the defensive and kind of play for time and make the Allies bleed enough that they can arrive at perhaps some kind of negotiated peace, despite the fact that Franklin Roosevelt had asked for unconditional surrender, had demanded unconditional surrender. But the easy victories, the relatively easy victories of 1939 and 1941, they're things of the past. They're not going to happen again. They know that. So in early October of 1943, over the course of a few days, a bunch of Nazi leaders hold these series of conferences. And, you know, the Gauleiters and the Reichsleiters had always wanted to have kind of a regular conferences, and Hitler would never allow it because he didn't want them to establish some kind of a power block that could potentially challenge him. But he does allow things like this occasionally. And so we have this meeting in Posen that is going to be primarily made up of Gauleiters. These are the kind of, again, regional party leaders, and Reichsleiters. And then you have a number of SS generals will attend and higher police leaders will attend. Himmler gives a speech on 4 October 1943. And he discusses a lot of different topics, and one thing that he discusses is the mass murder of Jews that is taking place in Europe. Now this is incredibly important because you had never had any mention of the murders of the Jews as government policy spoken of publicly in a forum like this before. These decisions had always been taken in small groups. They were very hush-hush. And now here you have one of the highest-ranking Nazi leaders addressing all of these Nazis, talking about these things going on in the East. So Himmler gives this speech on October 4th, 1943. He discusses the murder of the Jews, the mass murder of the Jews, along with some other topics and some broader issues about the war. But again, he's speaking to hundreds of people, hundreds of these Gauleiters and Reichsleiters and generals and what have you. Now, in this speech, he does say a couple of important things. In fact, I believe this first one was to the SS generals. He says, "I am now referring to the evacuation of the Jews, the extermination of the Jewish people. It's one of those things that is easily said. The Jewish people are being exterminated. Says every party member, this is very obvious. It's in our program. Elimination of the Jews, extermination. We're doing it. Ha, a small matter." And then they turn up the upstanding 80 million Germans. Each one of them has his decent Jew. They say the others are all swines, but this particular one is a splendid Jew. But none had observed it, endured it. Most of you here know what it means when 100 corpses lie next to each other, or when there are 500, or when there are 1,000. To have endured this, and at the same time to have remained a decent person, with exceptions due to human weakness, has made us tough. And this is a glorious chapter that has not and will not be spoken of, because we know how difficult it would be for us
if we still had Jews as secret saboteurs, agitators, and rabble-rousers in every city, what with the bombings, with the burden, and with the hardships of the war. If the Jews were still a part of the German nation, we would most likely arrive now at the state we were at in 1916 and 17. 2 days later, on October 6th, he gave a speech to the Gauleiters and Reichsleiters, so it's a much bigger assembled group here. And he tells them about his decisions concerning the elimination of the Jews, and he says how it was the most difficult decision of his life. He said, quote, "I ask of you that which I say to you in this circle be really only heard and not ever discussed. We were faced with the question, what about the women and children? I decided to find a clear solution to this problem too. I did not consider myself justified to exterminate the men, in other words, to kill them or have them killed and allow the avengers of our sons and grandsons in the form of their children to grow up. The difficult decision had been made to have this people disappear from the earth. For the organization which had to execute this task, it was the most difficult which we had ever had. I felt obliged to you, as the most superior dignitary of the party, this political order, this political instrument of the Führer, to also speak about the question quite openly and to say how it has been. The Jewish question in the countries that we occupy will be solved by the end of this year. Only remainders of odd Jews that manage to find hiding places will be left over." And so, in telling people so frankly, these SS and party officials so frankly about what's happening, he's further implicating them in the regime's crimes. And thus, he's letting them know that if Germany loses the war, they will all have a lot to answer for. So he's spurring all of them to devote themselves further to the war effort in implicating them.
Now, there's another interesting little thing that happens here as a result of Posen. Albert Speer attended this conference. Now, he will claim largely ignorance about the specifics of the Holocaust at Nuremberg, and he'll be given a 20-year jail sentence. And he'll be released from jail in 1966. And after he's released from jail, he writes his memoirs, Inside the Third Reich, which you read that snippet from. And he will become something of a celebrity after his release as a result of that book. And people kind of take a lot of what he said at face value. And then, I want to say it was a graduate student. I think it was Matthias Schmidt was his name. He actually says, but wait a second, you were here at this conference. And then Speer said, oh, yeah, I left early. And in part of Hitler's speech, which they had the recordings of, he said something along the lines of, you've been working hard, yada, yada, and a lot of that is we've getting a lot done thanks to the work of party comrade Speer here. Thank you. He addresses Speer in the recording. And Speer said, oh, no, he must have been mistaken. He must have thought I was there, But this is a big thing that Speer kind of hangs his already flimsy credibility on over what happened at this conference here.